Welcome to Literary AF Podcast.
Hi, welcome to the I Hate Books podcast. I'm your host, Josh, and I've never read a book in my life. Books suck.
Not quite. This is the Literary AF podcast. And my name is Danny.
And I'm Sheldon.
And today, we're continuing with the Trek.
The epic saga.
The epic saga. The Twilight Saga.
The greatest literary work our generation has ever known.
Yeah.
Written by a golden queen herself, Stephanie J. Myers.
Is it Jay?
I have no idea. I just made it up. It is now.
The epitome of my high school experience that I'm forced to relive now that I'm 26.
She's a hero, a queen, a scholar, a goddess, really, among men. So we're on book 3. Let's do just a really quick recap of the first 2 books.
Okay.
Book 1, nothing happens. She falls in love with a vampire, and he's a jerk.
Yes.
Book 2, she gets dumped by the vampire. She meets a werewolf.
Yes.
Who she's in love with, but just as friends.
Yeah, just friends love.
He likes her for real.
Yes.
And then she dumps
him
butt
for the vampire.
For the vampire.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, and there's like some action scenes that happen while the protagonist is unconscious, and
yes,
weird Italian vampires who will kill you. The suicide via Volturi or whatever.
Yeah, Volturi suicide. Yeah,
all right,
that's basically it.
Nailed it. If anyone's wondering why my voice sounds extra handsome, it's because I'm sick. I'm dying. I got a touch of the consumption.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Tuberculosis.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, between me coughing up blood, we will be able to talk about Eclipse. Let's talk about the general story summary of Eclipse.
Okay. So, Eclipse takes place shortly
after.
Shortly after New Moon. And Bella and Edward are back together.
Yeah.
And Jacob is super jealous. And in the last book, Edward said that he would turn Bella into a vampire on the condition that they got married.
Yeah.
And that's like the first 300 pages of this book is just Bella and Edward being together. Charlie doesn't like Edward. Jacob doesn't like Edward. And that's like the first half of this book.
Yeah, but there's other stuff too. Like they're like Charlie's still mad at Bella because she disappeared, so he put her under house arrest, and then doesn't want her to see Edward, and they kind of work that out.
He rescinds the house arrest under the condition that she goes to hang out with her other friends too.
Yeah, she has to visit Jacob and her human friends.
Yep.
Then there's other stuff like Alice is like planning a graduation party and stuff, and she has a day where she actually does hang out with the human friends, and
that is only after she hangs out with Jacob.
Okay. And
then Edward gets mad that she snuck away from him to hang out with Jacob, so he chases her down with his Volvo till she goes to a friend's house where she's safe.
We're going to have a lot to talk about Edward later, but
there's
first,
so much I want to talk about in this. But yeah. So
okay.
that's like the first half of the book. It's mostly drama. And then they also talk about how there's been a string of murders in Seattle. And about halfway point through the book, you realize that the murders are being committed by a bunch of newborn vampires.
Yeah.
And
Edward speculates that in the very first chapter, but it's kind of dropped until like halfway through the book.
That is true. He suspects it's one vampire, and then you find out that there's actually way more.
The summary said that he thought it was a group of newborn vampires who were on a spree.
Ah.
But there's also other stuff like Rosalie does her backstory during the first half.
Yeah, you find out Rosalie's backstory. You find out Jasper's backstory.
And the werewolf, like how their clan got started. I think that's in the first half too.
No.
Well,
that's a little bit after the first half, but it's in there, yeah. You find out a bunch of backstory and stuff like that, for sure.
So then anyway, the newborn vampire army.
Yes.
They decide they're going to attack Bella.
Yeah, Bella comes home one day and she realizes like a bunch of her stuff has been taken,
Yeah.
and they realize it's not a smell that anybody's familiar with, and it's another vampire. And then Bella starts to put the pieces together, and she assumes that the newborn vampire army is being created by Victoria.
Oh, but first though,
Hmm?
she goes through a thing where she thinks it's the Volturi
Yes.
who are coming to make sure that she's been converted, and she
Yes.
hasn't been yet.
Yes.
And then she starts to think that it's the Volturi that are coming to fight the newborn army, but they're stopping in to check on Bella for some reason.
Yeah.
And then Bella's like, oh wait, what if the newborn army is being raised to destroy me? Because why wouldn't they go through that length to destroy Bella?
Yeah. So it is the newborn army is being raised to destroy Bella because Victoria is the one who's been raising the army because she wants to get revenge for Edward killing her mate. I forget his name. James.
Yeah.
And this comes to a head where the werewolves and the vampires, the Cullens, work together to fight this newborn army of like 20 newborn vampires in Victoria. And then Jacob gets hurt really bad, and then Edward proposes to Bella officially, and then they defeat the army, and Jacob finds out that they're engaged, and he gets mad and runs away.
Oh, also they get engaged.
Yeah, they get engaged.
Um,
And that's where it ends.
but it sounds like a pretty simple story that could be told in about 100 pages.
Yeah.
But it actually takes like 500 pages. How long is it?
My copy of the book is 630 pages. Yeah.
Longer.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but it takes longer because they have to argue about every little thing.
Well, yeah, the first 300 pages of this book are just exposition and drama for the sake of drama.
Yeah. I actually... Okay, so when I first read these books, it was like a decade ago, I kind of liked this one. I marginally liked this one. The first one I did like, but thought that there were some elements that were bad.
Yeah.
The second one I didn't like at all.
Right.
The third one I sort of liked.
Yeah.
And it's because... there's this big drama happening. They come up with a plan, which I always like in books when there's like, or like any story, where they have like an actual plan to face the threat.
Yeah.
There is nothing more annoying to me than a protagonist who just like blindly stumbles through like the action of the book.
Right.
I liked how the vampires and werewolves work together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about that. I like Alice, and I feel like there was a lot of Alice scenes in this book.
Yeah, there definitely was a lot of Alice in this book.
And and plus you get to see like the werewolves kind of fight and stuff, and that's fun.
Yeah, for sure.
But also there are many, many, many bad things. Oh wait, first, is there anything you like about this book?
I liked about this book.
Yeah.
It felt like it had more going for it than the last book did.
Well, it's got more momentum. Like, there's
Yeah.
more at stake than just...
More happened. There's actually something going on in this book.
Yeah, in the last book, Bella's just sad for a long time and then realizes that Edward's going to kill himself. And then it's like, oh, we got to get to Italy and stop him right away.
Yeah. The last book, like, turned into a book for the last 100 pages. And this one turned into a book, like, halfway through. So that's an improvement.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I have so many problems with this book. It has just been one after the other.
Whatever do you mean?
Where should I start?
Can we start with Edward?
I'll start with Edward. Edward is more of a controlling prick in this one than he was in the last one. Put it nicely.
Let me read the part of the chapter summary from the very first chapter.
Yeah.
Because so just for full disclosure, I've read these books a long time ago, and I just read a summary to like refresh myself. Danny read them a long time ago, and we're making her reread the entire books to torture her.
All of them, yeah.
But anyway, so this is the summary, or part of the summary. So Edward comes to visit and learns that Bella has been accepted to University of Alaska. Surprise! But, as well as him. He's also been accepted to every major Ivy League school and wants Bella to apply to Dartmouth. She refuses, but Edward submits her application materials anyway.
I had that marked down in here to talk about.
So that's the first one. But then the very next paragraph, Edward suggests that Bella go shopping with Alice in Seattle. Charlie forbids her trip due to reports of a mysterious killing spree. Edward reveals to Bella that his family suspects the killing spree to be the work of newborn vampires. So, Edward is aware of the killing spree going on in Seattle and is like, Bella, I think you should go.
To be fair, I think she's safe with Alice, but yeah, no.
It's just so funny that he's always trying to protect her all the time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he's like, hey, why don't you just go to the city where there's lots of murders going on that I believe are being committed by vampires?
Not only does he submit and handwrite all of her essays for her, there's a point where he's like, I write your signature better than you do anyways. And there's another part where he suggests that Bella go to Phoenix for the weekend to visit her mother.
To visit her mom.
And she doesn't want to go. She says, oh, we'll go another weekend. It's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Because she got tickets for her birthday last year. And she says no, she doesn't want to go. And Edward's response to this is to mention that they're going to Phoenix this weekend to Charlie so that Bella can't change her mind about it.
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think other than a couple of moments, I think this book solidifies me as Team Jacob.
Oh, this went way the opposite way for me.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I only had one super problematic moment with Jacob, I think.
What's that?
I only found that there was one super problematic moment with Jacob.
I found a couple.
Okay.
And if you want me to get into this, I can start getting into this.
Are we done
with
Edward?
These down.
Is there any other real controlling points we want to mention? All right. So, like we were saying, no editing done there. We're just natural conversation.
So here's a point where Bella wants to go visit Jacob. She hasn't seen him in a while, and she Edward's gone away, and she thinks she can get out to go see Jacob, talk to him, because they haven't been talking since Edward came back.
Yeah.
And she goes out to the car, and she tries to start her truck, and it doesn't start.
Yeah.
And this reads, my eyes were just beginning to adjust as I shoved my keys in the ignition. I twisted them hard to the left, but instead of roaring deafeningly to life, the engine just clicked. I tried it again with the same results. And then a small motion in my peripheral vision made me jump. Gah! I gasped in shock when I saw that I was not alone in the cab. Edward sat very still, a faint bright spot in the darkness, only his hands moving as he turned a mysterious object around and around. He stared at the object as he spoke. Alice called, he murmured. Alice. Damn, I've forgotten to account for her in my plans. He must have been watching me. She got nervous when your future rather abruptly disappeared 5 minutes ago. My eyes were already wide with surprise. They popped wider. Because she can't see the wolves, you know, he explained in the same low murmur. Had you forgotten that? When you decided to mingle your fate with theirs, you disappeared too. You couldn't know that part. I realize that. But you can understand why that might make me a little anxious. Alice saw you disappear, and she couldn't even tell if you'd come home or not. Your future got lost, just like theirs.
I hate him.
And what he did was he took the battery out of her car so she couldn't leave the house without him knowing. So. Oh, he's terrible. Everybody in this book is consistently terrible. That's just...
Yeah.
It's miserable to read the whole thing. I hate it.
So wait, what are your problems with Jacob? Because I only remember one part that was bad.
So, first off, when Bella starts to come back to visit Jacob, he is constantly calling Edward names. He's calling Bella names for dating Edward. He's basically just insulting him constantly.
Yeah, but Edward sucks, though, so I don't,
Edward
take that
sucks,
as a bad thing.
But, when you hang out with your best friend, you don't want to listen to them constantly, saying mean stuff about your significant other, like this person that you really like.
We do that constantly. I was going to make a joke, but then I realized that not every listener to this podcast knows our friend Josh.
Yeah.
But anyway, to Josh's wife, we're always telling her, you should leave that jump. Sorry, Josh.
And then there's the part where he tells Bella that he loves him and that he should be the one instead of Edward, and you need to pick me, and it's just, I don't know.
The way it's presented in the summary is he wants her to know that he's an option.
Well, here I I made sure to mark these down in a bunch of different colors so that I could find them for sure. Jacob's eyebrows pulled down, throwing his deep-set eyes into shadow. They were pitch black as they bored into mine. I'm in love with you, Bella, Jacob said in a strong, sure voice. Bella, I love you, and I want you to pick me instead of him. I know you don't feel that way, but I need the truth out there so that you know your options. I wouldn't want a miscommunication to stand in our way. And then, 2 pages later...
Well, let's just pause there for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Because up to this point, I'm still like, I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Like, it's a little scummy, but I mean, at the same time, it's like, Bella's kind of doing it to herself. Like, she knows he's in love with her. And she's still like, but he's my best friend. So
That's,
see him all
Bella's
the time.
not making it easy for either of them, but
Yeah.
let me try to change your mind here. Okay. He still had my chin, his fingers holding too tight till it hurt, and I saw the resolve abruptly in his eyes. I started to object, but it was too late. His lips crushed mine, stopping my protest. He kissed me, angrily, roughly, his other hand gripping tight around the back of my neck, making escape impossible. I shoved against his chest with all my strength, but he didn't even seem to notice. His mouth was soft despite the anger, his lips molding to mine in a warm, unfamiliar way. I grabbed at his face, trying to push it away, failing again. He seemed to notice this time, though, and it aggravated him. His lips forced mine open, and I could feel his hot breath in my mouth. Acting on instinct, I let my hands drop to my side and I shut down. I opened my eyes and I didn't fight. I didn't feel. I just waited for him to stop. That's.
Well, first off, I'm not comfortable talking about the sort of imagery that Stephanie Meyer evokes there.
Yeah.
But when I said I had up to, like, that I was on Team Jacob up to one certain thing.
This was that thing?
This was the thing.
Yeah. Are you done now? I asked in an expressionless voice. Yes, he sighed. He started to smile, closing his eyes. I pulled my arm back and then I let it snap forward, punching him in the mouth with as much power as I could force out of my body. And she breaks his hand on her face.
Well, good.
And a couple pages later, Jacob takes her home because she doesn't want to hang out with Jacob anymore, understandably. And Jacob tells Charlie that Bella thinks she broke her hand. And Charlie's like, well, what'd you do? And Jacob says, oh, she punched me. And Charlie says, why? And Jacob says, oh, because I kissed her. And you know what Charlie says to that?
I know.
He turns to Jacob and he says, good for you, kid.
Yeah, but that doesn't make Jacob
That doesn't make Jacob worse. That makes Charlie worse. I have been on Charlie's side up to this point.
Let's be fair. That makes Stephanie Meyer worse.
Stephanie Meyer is the worst offender out of all of this. Don't get me wrong.
Our golden queen has become a trash lord. Lordess. Lady. Trash lady.
Then there's Charlie says, oh, don't be too hard on him. He's just young. As though doing that is acceptable when you're 16. And then later on, near the final fight with Victoria, Jacob finds out that Edward and Bella are engaged, and he gets extremely upset. And he stops to talk to Bella, and Bella's like, Jacob, I'm sorry for hurting you. And Jacob's response is, whatever, that's fine. I'm just gonna go kill myself. And then Bella's like, well, no, don't do that. And Jacob's like, no, that's fine. I'll take myself out of the equation. I'll just let myself die in this fight. Unless you kiss me. So that scamp. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, that's consistent with Edward too. The second, he was like, "Oh, can't have Bella. Oop, time to go kill myself in battle." Why do they always kill themselves in battle? Like, somebody should tell Stephanie Meyer about a gun.
Edward was like, I don't want to live in a world where Bella is dead. Jacob is like, I don't want to live in a world where I can't have Bella. And throughout this entire book, Edward has been like, Bella, if you like Jacob more, that's okay. You can go be with Jacob. If that makes you happy, you can be with Jacob. And this entire book, Jacob has been like, no, you should pick me. You need to pick me. I'm the better choice of the two. There's actually, there's a point in this book where Jacob is like, you and Edward are a completely different species. You shouldn't date somebody outside your species. You should date a human, like me, the werewolf.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, Kate, this brings me to my... Sorry, my brain's not working, so I'm sick.
Yeah, that's fine. We can also chop some of this up.
We will not edit a single moment from this podcast. Mark my words. Editing Sheldon, you keep your hands off this. Okay, but the thing is Edward, he starts the book as such a controlling,
for sure,
horrible, vindictive character.
Sure.
And throughout the book, it's as if Bella changed him. The ultimate, like, Stephanie Meyer power fantasy is that Bella could change this wicked vampire into a loving and respectful mate.
Yeah. Well, I'm not excusing any of them. Edward sucks. Bella sucks. Jacob sucks the most for me after this book. I don't know. I was on Team Jacob up until this book, and then that flipped it way around for me.
For me, it's up until the kiss.
Yeah.
Up until the forced kiss.
Yeah.
Because the whole, like, talking smack about a guy you hate when you're, like, competing for the woman, that's, like, immature, and it's not a good move.
Yeah.
But it's, like, I think it's understandable.
Sure.
And then, like, even the, like, I'm going to confess to you, I'm sorry if that puts you in an awkward position, but I need you to know. Like, for me, that's understandable as well, even though it's still, like, it's not a good situation all around.
Right.
But then it's like, and now I'm going to forcefully kiss you, and and then even when you fight against it, I'm going to keep doing it, and then I'm just going to wait until you go limp, basically.
Yeah. When you're kissing somebody and they just stop everything they're doing and then stare at you open-eyed till you stop, you should have stopped kissing earlier.
What? That's my go-to move when I'm kissing. Just freeze dead and stare at them.
On the drive home after their kiss, Jacob's in the car and he's like, man, that was such a good kiss. You know, I'm such a good kisser. That was a way better kiss than ever kissed with Edward, right? And Belle's like, no, that was awful.
I don't know. What do you think is the author's, like, what's going on in her head as she's doing this? Because clearly there's a part of her who like gets off on this somehow.
It's just a very juvenile way to have a love triangle.
Because the second time they kiss.
Yeah. Jacob is still coerced her into kissing him.
But then Bella falls in love with him. She realizes that she's been in love with him the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, it's like, I don't think Stephanie Meyer saw it as like a coercive, like it reads like a rape scene, okay? Let's be clear.
It does.
And
but
like,
there's like a point, Bella kisses him and Jacob's like, this sucks, you could do better. And then Bella kisses him again, and then she gets a little more into it, but then it's too much, so she tries to push Jacob off of her. But Jacob misinterprets and assumes that she's trying to pull him in more, and then they kiss harder. And then Bella is like, oh, I'm in love with Jacob, which is not a great scene.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, I want to understand, like, what is going on in her mind as she's writing these scenes, like, you know, like, what's she trying to build up to? Because ultimately, they don't matter at all.
No.
Because, like, Bella starts out in love with Edward.
Bella stays in love with Edward.
She
kind of flirts with Jacob. Oh, she kind of loves Jacob, but there's never any option other than Edward. It's never a question of whether she's going to go to Jacob or not. Like,
there's no arc. Like,
no.
There's no character arc, really. Like,
no.
At the start of this book, she wants to marry Edward and be turned into a vampire.
Yes.
At the end of this book, she wants to marry Edward and be turned into a vampire.
You could cut the whole Jacob arc out. You could reduce this whole thing by about 600 pages. You could just make one long book and introduce Jacob, like, at the end.
This is honestly one of those, what's it called? I can't remember the name for it, but there's, like, a term for when you have, like, a series of movies or series of books, and there's one, like, sequel that, like, could be completely removed and not change anything from the series.
Yeah, that would be New Moon, for sure.
This one, too, though. New Moon at least introduced the Volturi.
You could smash New Moon and this book together into a much shorter book.
That's true. This could have been a tighter trilogy.
Yeah.
Instead of a sprawling
stretched
four-part.
Out 4-book, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like, that's a big problem with this book for me, is like, nothing changes by the end of this book.
No.
Like, they fight off this army of vampires, which you didn't really have any didn't really know about, didn't really care about before this book started.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, I guess Victoria's still out there.
Yeah.
But she never seemed like a real threat.
No.
The Volturi show up for like 2 seconds and be like, "Who? We're bad guys. Remember us?"
Yeah, they show up for a couple paragraphs and then they leave again. Because they show
Well,
up after the fight. So
gotta
they
get
really
back on our
need
plane to Italy. Nice to see you. That's my Italian accent.
Perfect.
Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah, this whole book, it just, like I said earlier, the first 300 pages basically is just drama for the sake of drama that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
So, it's
But
rough. It's
much
rough to sit
like
through.
Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we have an extended camping scene in the woods, so that's fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And there's a whole like chapter where Jacob and Edward are having a conversation, but because the entire series is told through Bella's perspective, she's like awake in her sleeping bag, but she thinks she's dreaming, so this conversation is never mentioned again outside of the tent.
Also, I noticed like when I was reading the chapter summary, there was a lot of like Edward communicates to the werewolves through like his like mind reading
Yes.
skill,
Yes.
and like there's a lot of like stuff like that in it. But because it's told from Bella's perspective, it's like, is it just Edward telling her that he's saying
Yes,
these
it
things?
is. Yeah.
It's such a lazy way of doing a story.
The final fight, most of the werewolves are out in another area fighting. The final fight, most of it happens off screen, except for Victoria finding Bella, Edward, and Seth. I was gonna say Sam, but Sam's not the right one. Seth. Victoria finds them and they fight Victoria, but elsewhere there are 20 newborn vampires in a fight with a pack of werewolves and the rest of the Cullens, and we miss that whole encounter completely. And through this encounter, Edward is mind reading Seth, so he's in on the pack group chat with the rest of the werewolves.
Yeah, essentially they're in a Discord server.
Yeah, and so Edward is just saying all the thoughts out loud so that Bella can hear, so that we can actually hear what's going on. It's annoying, but yeah, it is.
I don't know. I haven't seen the movies, and I was gonna force myself to before the series is done, but it's not gonna happen. But yeah, that to me, like, I just wish the movies were done in the same way, where it's just instead of showing an action scene, it's just Edward laying down beside her, being like, "Oh," and then a werewolf bit a vampire, and then another vampire ran past. Like,
I'm probably gonna watch the movies before we do the last one, but.
yeah, which is next week. So what are some other? Is there any other thoughts? Like this one's not. There's not as much to talk about.
They talk about Wuthering Heights a lot in this book. It starts on page 9. Bella has a copy of Wuthering Heights out on her breakfast counter this morning, and it's old and it's worn because it's one of her favorite books ever. And then Edward comes over and they do the university applications and he's like, "Oh, you're reading that book again. I hate Wuthering Heights." Because apparently he is not impressed by antiquity, and it's a book about, where is it here? I don't know how Heathcliff and Cathy end up being ranked with couples like Romeo and Juliet or Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. It isn't a love story, it's a hate story. I don't know Wuthering Heights, so I don't know how accurate this is.
No, I've read it. That's fairly. They're really bad people, if I remember correctly, and it's like, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've read Wuthering Heights too.
Bella says their love for each other is their only redeeming quality as a couple. And then it pops up again like partway through. And then they read a passage of Wuthering Heights to each other. And then it comes up again at the end where Bella compares herself to Cathy. "Cathy's a monster, but there are a few things she got right," I muttered. I read the lines quickly, mostly to myself. "If all else perished and he remained, I could still continue to be, and if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn into a mighty stranger." I nodded again to myself. I know exactly what she means, and I know who I cannot live without. Edward took the book from my hands and flipped it across the room. It landed with a light thud on my desk. He wrapped his arms around my waist.
Around his own waist? That'd be impressive.
A small smile lit his perfect face, though worry still lined his forehead. "Heathcliff had his moments too," he said. "He didn't need the book to get the words perfect. He pulled me closer and whispered in my ear, I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. It seems like she just picks a classic lit book to base all of these other books off of.
Well, it's too bad she didn't pick like Anna Karenina and have Bella cheat on him for a while with some strange soldier, and then have Bella's life completely fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting to the time.
Yeah.
So I would rate this book 3 werewolves out of 100. No, it's not that bad. I don't know. It's like
there's some foreshadowing in here. I don't know. I can read this to you real quick.
Very quick, because we are over time.
Okay, so they talk about imprinting, and you learn.
Oh no! Don't. Okay, we don't need to talk about imprinting because we're going to talk about that a lot next week.
Let me just.
No, there's so much to talk about.
Let me just read this one. One of Jacob's friends is imprinted on somebody, and Bella's like, "Who is it? You gotta tell me." And Jacob goes, "Try not to be too judgmental, okay?" I nodded cautiously. "Claire is too," Jacob told me. Rain started to fall. I blinked furiously as the drops pelted my face. Jacob waited in silence. He wore no jacket, as usual. The rain left a splatter of dark spots on his black t-shirt and dripped through his shaggy hair. His face was expressionless as he watched mine. Quill imprinted on a 2-year-old? I was finally able to ask. It happens, Jacob shrugged. So,
all right,
there's some foreshadowing for you.
Thanks for listening to Literary Whatever podcast. You can follow us on Gmail or on the Facebook, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Oh, wait, we actually do have one.
We do have a YouTube channel, yeah.
Okay, so write us at Gmail at
Gmail is literaryafpod@gmail.com.
And our Twitter is
LiteraryAFPod.
And our Facebook is
LiteraryAF.
And our
Facebook.
Tumblr.
No, we didn't. We don't have Tumblr.
Okay. And our dig.com. Do you remember Dig?
No, I don't. Dig was before my time.
Okay. This is old Reddit. All right. Phil, thank you all for listening. Merry Christmas. And tune in next week when we learn how werewolves fall in love with babies.
Oh, God.